So enough of hearing from me. I'd like to introduce our three speakers. We have joining us today, Michelle Patrick, Community Arts Development Specialist and ADA Coordinator with the Nevada Arts Council, Kim Konikow, Executive Director of the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and Shannon Ford, Director of Community Arts Development at the Tennessee Arts Commission. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Michelle to get us started with a quick overview of Nevada Arts Council's work with rural communities. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Declan. And I just wanted to say good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much again for attending this series. So I just wanted to give a quick overview about our work with the Nevada Basin to Range Exchange, also affectionately known as BRX. It's a professional development networking opportunity designed to facilitate collaboration between rural and metropolitan communities in Nevada. This biennial in-person gathering provides a really unique setting catered towards cultural understanding and community development between rural and urban metropolitan residents. Some of the key components and goals of the program are aimed to develop relationships, to build trust, and we've created this program specifically to promote the value and the impact art has in all communities, as well as a way to engage and elevate a stronger interconnected cultural landscape statewide. We also do this work to eliminate common stereotypes and false narratives between rural and urban constituencies. We do this work also to amplify traditions, assets, and histories. We highlight these things not for the purpose of exploitation, but to highlight the significance of why community members value them, but also to learn why some community members may not want to share them. And lastly, we also do this work to celebrate and support local economies. When we bring these gatherings to different smaller communities and townships, we essentially are helping to increase local revenue, and we also allow participants to see other parts of the state that they may not have ever traveled to. So just a little brief background, the program was adapted from the Kentucky Rural Urban Exchange, a program that works to bridge divides between Kentuckians and build connections through annual weekends and other programming. The Nevada Arts Council launched and piloted its version in 2019, but in 2020, the program and partnerships were disrupted due to the pandemic. But this past April, we resumed with our 3-day convening, which was held in the historic town of Ely at the Ely Convention Center. And several local civic leaders were also in attendance, which included Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Geraldine Harper. We had attendance from the White Pine Chamber of Commerce Board President, Samantha Elliott, and Shadrach Robinson, who is the Executive Director of the Ely Film and Art Music Film Festival, who is also the first husband of Mayor Nathan Robinson. We were so excited. He came with opening remarks to welcome us and talk about Ely and really how excited they were to have the BRX program in Ely. So this year's theme focused on legacy. Next slide, please. And we explored ways to honor the past, engage in the present, and we really wanted our constituency to focus and plan on the future. Next slide. So throughout the day, throughout the 3-day convening, we really wanted our participants to focus on what is legacy? What does that look like? So for example, if a tourist is coming into your town, we really wanted participants to think about, well, what's some of the feedback? Are tourists saying, don't go to that town because, or is some of the feedback, well, you should really go to this town because it's a really great place to visit and the residents were really warm. Again, thinking about what each person was contributing to their community, right? What lasting impact they were going to have. And really giving our attendees really just some time to reflect about what that looks like. So not only having them think about what community looks like, but also thinking about the social and economic development and what that impact looks like and how that affects long-term sustainability. But also having each and every participant, whether or not they were from a rural or from a metropolitan area, to really start thinking and driving solutions that were impactful. Next slide, please. We also had an opportunity to walk through what community feedback looked like. And we did this with reviewing some of the questions, or rather the answers that we had received in some of the applications from our participants. So again, we wanted participants to really focus and hone in on some of the similar challenges that each of them faced in their communities, but also looking at the commonalities and the appreciation of our state. So again, some of you that are looking at this, if you look at some of the challenges, I think that many of you will also say, hey, this is something that is also very similar to some of the challenges that we're also facing. Again, affordable housing. I think that is something that is also just a national challenge as well. Inequitable healthcare, something again, our rural and urban constituencies were really, really honing in on, and we were creating a lot of meaty conversation around. Again, cultural events, programming, what does that look like now with changing demographics? And then again, really honing in and focusing on the commonalities and the appreciation of Nevada. Again, the resiliency, the people, the landscape, and the different cultures. We had a lot of discussion again about what's happening in our communities. Next slide, please. And again, having the numbers, right? Having those numbers and looking at them. Is your community growing? Are people in your community leaving? Why? We wanted to present these numbers to encourage our participants to think about how they could also apply these numbers in their grant narratives. Again, really driving in and focusing on how you tell your story, not just to tourists or to other community members, but to the Arts Council, to your story, just in terms of your own community. What does that look like? Because these numbers do help. And it was also a really, really great way for our community members to see what was also happening, not just in their own community, but how things are shifting in others as well. One of the last things, next slide, please, that I wanted to point out during this, and I've also included the link to our webpage and our website, which gives a much more descriptive detail about this event and the program itself. There's also a link to the schedule in terms of what those 3 days look like. But I wanted to point this out. This was something that we tried new, which was our networking and creative stations, where all of our participants had an opportunity to either network independently or take advantage of some of the resources that we not only wanted to consolidate, but utilize and make accessible to all of our participants. So for example, they had an opportunity to work with our state poet laureate, which was really exciting, or they had an opportunity to work with a project from our 2019 BRX partnership project, or they had an opportunity to talk with Shadrach about event planning, or they just had an opportunity to make really cool collages with the Nevada Arts Council staff and get an opportunity to know us. So again, we really wanted to take this opportunity to, again, utilize what we had and present this to our constituency as well. Again, that link is provided in the chat. I know everyone will have some questions, but I'll save those for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Sounds excellent. Great to hear about. I'm looking forward to digging into it soon. Kim, if you wouldn't mind presenting on North Dakota and the great work you're doing next.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. We're really happy to participate with my two colleagues. Eric, if you can put in the chat, I'm just going to give you the link to our website, and then also there's a link to our Grants at a Glance page. North Dakota is an incredibly vast land with still well under 1 million people. So when we talk about diversity in North Dakota, the first thing we talk about is rural. That is really where most of our, well, actually not most, but many of our constituents are, and that number is definitely growing. We utilize an online grant system, and in that our guidelines that we have 10 plus grant programs right now, but we indicate funding rural people and communities, particularly in our community arts access and special projects grant programs. These are really populated more by current recipients. I think that for North Dakota and the Arts Council, what we've really focused on is building new relationships. That's been critical. So we have a board of 8, one for each region of the state. And we have a new advisory group called REACH, R-E-A-C-H, which is 8 people from across the state and includes BIPOC, Native, Folk, Asian, and rural. We've also then created a more user-friendly brochure that are being distributed at rural events and can work out at least to get to our programs. I would say that when we think about it, there's quite a number of people. If you were in rural North Dakota, they would say, North Dakota Council, what? They don't know we exist. They don't know that we have funds that can help them. And Eric, can you throw the brochure into the chat? Thank you. We just tried really hard. It'll allow you to open it up on your own. I can also do that very quickly, she said, searching for the share button. Okay. Here we go. So this was a brochure that we have just created. And one of the things that we did was to simplify the language so that it wasn't so wordy, which many of our older materials are. And then we included as minimal information as possible with a lot of graphics. And one thing that we were told by our REACH committee, which is kind of a DEI group, but that people needed to see themselves recognizable in the photos so that they would know that we existed. So that was really important to us to use the photos and really try to bring more people, let more people see themselves in our programs and then be able to apply. There are also 2 new grant programs in development. One is specifically toward accessibility for organizations, again, rural or urban, but based on allowing them to either get help with translation or help with closed captioning or signage, anything that would work for them. So we also utilize site visits and webinars to stay engaged. But I think the point I'm trying to make is we at the council don't really see a difference between our rural and our urban communities, other than that they are tightly packed into the urban communities and very, very spread out. I figured out that it is almost 9 hours from one side of the state to the other. And we also do a lot of site visits when we can, when there is no snow or when there is very little snow. So we're going to go ahead now, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Arts Across the Prairie. So the link is in the chat, and we're going to show a little bit of a PowerPoint here. So Arts Across the Prairie, it's called Placemaking in Rural North Dakota. It's a statewide program, and I believe it is the first statewide placemaking program in the country. Next, 8 large-scale installations are going to be placed in rural settings, one for each region of the state, and they're going to be based specifically on the cultural heritage that is a part of North Dakota. So Arts Across the Prairie was developed to celebrate the cultural heritage of rural areas, to foster creative relationships across the counties and regions, to bolster our role as a rural development partner and spur economic development through tourism. So furthermore, as a community-driven initiative, it's aiming to promote civic pride, affirm a distinctiveness of place, and strengthen cultural identity. So the goals are to do cross-county networking, regional collaboration, again, 8 regions, promote tourism for in and out of state visitors, and stimulate economic activity and development in rural areas, build stronger arts communities across the state, and heighten the visibility of our creative sector. We're also investing in North Dakota artists by providing professional development, training, and support, and then celebrating and leveraging existing assets with an infusion of creative expression. So we're currently involved in several of the regions. The first is Region 1, which is in the northwest corner of the state. Your phone says, "Welcome to Canada," when you hit Divide County and you're not in Canada yet. We received an Our Town grant and then received private donations and a charitable foundation up in that area. And interestingly enough, we had a problem with the site, and now we're looking at the new site, but we have a project selected. Next slide. This is an image of the land work that is going to be built. And when we are looking for land to do these projects on, we're going rural equals no people, no buildings. So for us, that's actually really important. It's also harder than heck, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a local artist who lives in New York City, and this is his work. Next slide. On the other side of the state, the northeast corner, and just as an aside, I chose the northwest corner because it only had 3 counties, but no one ever told me how big the counties were and how vast the expanse was. So I'm now in Region 4 on the northeast side, and the site is the windiness of these hills on the upper right picture. It's called the Dolinesker, and it's a glacial formation. So the artist has been selected, and his site visit happened just last week. Next slide. And these are samples of his work, and they reflect what the stakeholders, again, so people from all of the counties are on the stakeholder group. So that's really important that they all participate. But they then put together the request for proposal and how they described their cultural heritage, the land, the people, the history. That is what the artist began to interpret. So it'll be some semblance of these two together. Next. Then we're in Region 3, where we're just forming a stakeholder group. This is actually going to be a little bit of an interesting process. There are 2 tribal reservations there, and we're hopeful that they're going to help work together. But again, rural means no buildings or people, natural landscape based on cultural heritage. If we locate off a state highway, then we get a little bit of help from DOT. And next slide. So in Region 2, we have just about selected a site, and we're looking at securing some land. This again is private property. So the state through NDCA will enter into an easement because renting was not feasible. You couldn't do that for about only more than 2 years. And buying was definitely out of the picture. So we're doing easements, and they're developing their own request for proposal. Next slide. Region 6 has a lot of people in it, but they have actually been working, and we're going on a site visit tour next weekend. And we've got 12 sites to choose from, which will get narrowed down probably to 3, which will then the stakeholders will make their selection. Next slide. Region 8, down in the southwest corner of North Dakota, the stakeholder group is definitely active. Again, another very spread out, lots of rural with smaller communities. And they're about ready to select their site. Next slide. So stakeholders mean that they have to be diverse individuals from across all counties. So if a region has 3 counties, like in Northwest North Dakota, we have about 15 people on the stakeholder group representing those counties. They have to commit to ongoing monthly meetings over Zoom. They have to facilitate the site selection for proposed art installation and handle the RFP. They engage community members in their communities and then across the regions. They assist in the artist selection, and they definitely celebrate their regional cultural heritage and spread knowledge. Next. That's it. Okay. So it's a tangled web. It's a wonderful program. It's been interesting. I have avoided the 2 areas of the state, regions 5 and 7, where there are the most high populations, and those include Fargo and Bismarck in terms of urban areas. And I'm not dealing with them until we are more further along in terms of how we can make this happen in more of the rural parts of the state. And then we'll come back to how do we get those urban communities to recognize that they have rural neighbors, and how are they building trust and working with them. And I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Kim. Sounds like an excellent program. I'm going to pass it on to Shannon.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you all. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. And so there we go. So I'm going to talk about grants and initiatives targeting rural communities at the Tennessee Arts Commission. In terms of our approach, we have written into the Tennessee Code in our enabling legislation that we are to serve rural artists and arts organizations. So that is really a part of our DNA. It's a part of our goals, objectives, and strategies of our strategic plan. And you know, we're always working to help develop, enhance, and promote authentic arts and cultural assets in rural communities. We engage with rural communities through a number of services and a wide range of funding opportunities, some of which I'm going to talk about. And we really try to take into consideration the unique circumstances that can be present in rural communities. So the first program that I'm going, or the first few programs I'm going to talk about. So our most obvious method for engaging rural communities is through our grant programs. And 3 of the programs that have been instrumental in helping our agency extend its support into all 95 of our counties are our decentralized Arts Build Communities grant program, our students ticket subsidy grant program for public schools, and our targeted arts development initiative grants. And by the way, for our purposes, we define about 79 of our counties, of our 95 counties, as rural. The Commission offers the Arts Build Communities program in partnership with 13 regional designated agencies. And those include local arts agencies and development districts. And they offer support for a wide range of eligible arts and cultural programming. These grants are awarded and administered by these agencies in their local service areas, and most of the grants benefit small, emerging, and volunteer-driven organizations. These partnerships have helped our agency learn about organizations and arts programming that we were unfamiliar with, and they also provide a trusted, familiar face to a grant that is often a new applicant's first time to seek public funding. 11 of the 13 agencies' service areas include rural counties, and the program awards grants to recipients in approximately half of the state's counties. The student ticket subsidy program provides funds for artist fees, tickets, and transportation fees for students from Tennessee public schools to experience a broad variety of cultural opportunities, arts disciplines, and arts learning from artists during the school day. Grant reports over time have revealed that for many students in rural schools, student ticket subsidy grants often provide their first engagement with a professional artist or arts organization. And then the Targeted Arts Development Initiative strategically reaches rural counties, which have been identified by the Commission as being underrepresented in commission investments, and usually almost exclusively they are rural. This program is also available for projects in counties that have been designated at risk or distress using the Appalachian Regional Commission's index-based county economic classification system. And in this program, staff develops professional development relationships with and offers technical assistance to the applicants. And we really assist in the development of the arts programs by organizations to be something that can be publicly supported by our agency. Next, I'll move on to some project grants that we have specifically target rural populations. We have a rural arts project support grant program that is specifically adjudicated by rurally based reviewers. It has removed the barrier of matching funds, and it is one of our larger grant programs. Our creative placemaking grant program is scaled to attract applicants seeking to enhance the distinctive character of rural communities through arts and culture. And the scoring criteria automatically awards bonus points to rural applicants. This program is also the only one of the agency's grants that allows in-kind matches. Our newer Creative Placemaking Rural Arts Facilities Fund grants are designed to help communities carry out initiatives that build, renovate, or expand arts and cultural facilities. So this is exclusively for rural applicants, and applicants are eligible to apply if they are located in one of basically 79 rural counties, and they're either an entity of local government or a nonprofit 501c3 legally chartered in Tennessee. This program includes scoring criteria also, but for this scoring criteria, we have bonus points for those that are in at-risk or distressed counties. We also have a number of operating support grants that are designed to meet the budget size and circumstances of discipline-based arts organizations, including a program that offers support exclusively to smaller rural arts organizations. But we do have organizations throughout the state and rural communities that access all three of our grant programs. Well, only one institution accesses our major cultural institutions grant. And then also the next few slides are going to represent some of the initiatives that the Commission has undertaken to engage rural populations through services and training and professional development. So the Commission partnered with the AIR Collaborative to offer to train community representatives from 6 Appalachian counties as facilitators with the goal of assisting diverse groups of local citizens with a design process to really enhance their community's cultural identity or impact their creative economy. So the 3-day AirShift workshops helped participants utilize design thinking to plan and design feasible projects for their communities and produce a simple business plan. And at this point, we have had 6 of those pilot communities engage in the process, and 5 will be receiving an implementation grant in fiscal year 24. One of the 6 completed their project this year, so they won't be receiving another grant. And then we also have, and I've loaded all of these into one slide, our Periscope Rural Artists Development Program is offered by the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville in partnership with the TAC, and it has been tailored to serve rural artists. The program provides tools and resources to help rural artists organize and plan and sustain creative careers with the goal of developing individualized business plans based on their unique creative output. And sessions are led by expert business advisors and a work group facilitated by arts professionals from across Tennessee. The Tennessee Arts Commission Folk Life Program, in partnership with Humanities Tennessee, has launched the Tennessee Folk Life Institute, which is a new immersive training program designed to encourage and increase the documentation, preservation, and presentation of Tennessee's folk life traditions. Over the course of 5 day-long sessions spread over 3 months, participants develop skills necessary to cultivate Tennessee's diverse cultural traditions. And the pilot workshop has focused on West Tennessee. The next session will be hosted in East Tennessee in 2024. And then finally, Tennessee Stages is a searchable online database of performing arts stages across the state. This was developed in collaboration with our Department of Economic and Community Development. And to date, the commission has collected data from over 400 permanent and temporary stages, and at least one exists in each of Tennessee's 95 counties. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Michelle and Kim. Thank you for the overview. I think this puts us in a good place where we see what the work looks like. So now let's dig into how it happens and how you make it happen. So I want to start with kind of a basic question that I think we saw in the chat, so it's on people's minds. But how do you define rural and rural communities in your states? I think depending on where you are and who you are, rural can mean a lot of different things. So curious to hear that.
You know, in North Dakota, there are, again, with 8 regions, and that's usually based around a city or an urban area. The largest being Fargo has 3 times the population of, say, Bismarck, where I am. And then in another area, the next largest would be probably Grand Forks. And then you get into maybe Minot and Dickinson, which are very low numbers. So again, when we think about rural, it is the majority of the state. It's just not in some of those large cities.
I would also have to add, well, we can talk about the technical aspect, right? That rural can mean that it's remote, it's desolate, but for many of our constituencies and for myself, it means respite, right? And then also thinking about programming and thinking about how we're reaching our constituency. Well, and just so that everyone knows, more than 85% of Nevada's land area is owned and administered by the federal government. I'll tap into more of that a little bit later, but that certainly leads into a lot of mistrust, especially when I'm entering or rather doing some of my on-site visits. So again, it's about, at least in our rural areas and counties, it's also about being really mindful about how we offer programming, how we're working with our constituencies, and then also just building a lot of trust.
Yeah, and in Tennessee, I mean, there are several definitions of rural. Our governor has made it a priority to serve rural populations. And probably the governor's office uses the most expansive definition. And that is where we have that definition is one that we have utilized for our rural arts facilities program, which basically takes every county where there's 50% or more of the area that is considered rural, and the whole county is then defined as rural.
Great, thank you. It's great to hear how there's differences in definition based on technical or community or even all state. And if people want to share in the chat how their own state defines rural, please go ahead and share. I'm sure it'll be useful. Michelle, I wanted to pick up on something you said just a minute ago, and I heard it in your presentation too, but you talked about legacy and perception, and then you talk about distrust, which is kind of the basin to range exchange. Sounds like you're trying to bridge these things. Could you talk about your work within these assumptions and how you work to counter assumptions about rural areas and urban areas?
Absolutely. One of the really meaty discussions that we had during our roundtable discussions was just around the concept of false narratives, and particularly around our rural constituency. I can tell you that the top three things were that art in rural areas weren't considered good quality. And I can tell you just based off of a lot of my field on-site visits, that is not the case. That is not true. And that there's excessive poverty. And then number three, I have to go there, that residents in rural areas are all racist, which again is not true. But I do want to share just a quick story, or rather a learning moment for me that I encountered while I was actually out during one of my site visits. I was working in a different county, and I'm still working with this group. But when I first started going, there was a gentleman there who was just, he was so rude. He was so rude. And it wasn't necessarily what he was saying. He wasn't saying anything. It was just how he was acting towards me. And my first assumption was to say, okay, he's having a hard time because I'm female, I'm Black. And I thought about this because as I was getting towards the end of my presentation, he actually interrupted me and he said, well, is there anyone else who can come and do this? Is there someone that we can pay to do this? And I looked at him and I said, yes, you can get a consultant to come and do this work, and they're going to tell you the same thing that I'm telling you right now. But here's what you're going to pay for that consultant to come in and help you. Me being here is the benefit of you being a taxpayer, in addition to the contribution that the National Endowment for the Arts makes for this visit. So this is the benefit that you are receiving. And this is my service as a public servant to you for this. And he looked at me for a really long time and then he didn't say anything. And just as I was leaving, he came up to me and he apologized for how he was acting towards me. And he said, it's not you. I just don't trust the government. So I stayed with him for 45 minutes after that presentation. And we just kind of walked through what this looked like. And again, really just establishing that trust and walking him through, right, or rather differentiating what this benefit was and what this resource was, as opposed to, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you how you can apply these resources, but rather just really looking at it from that different standpoint. So again, learning moment, I think for me, definitely, and for him as well. But Kim, Shannon, I don't know if you've had similar experiences just in terms of being a government worker, cultural worker, and having a similar experience.
Well, I think in Tennessee, what we find is certainly that there's a level of distrust for big government, and once we can really emphasize that we are here to really help local actors make local decisions, that's what, you know, our programs are geared toward enabling. That seems to bring the comfort level up a little. But certainly we've encountered a level of distrust.
Kim, I think you're muted right now if you're.
We really value a multitude of voices, so it's very important for us that when we're forming these stakeholder groups, that there are older, younger, that we're starting with somebody we know that there already is trust with, and that they're starting to expand the group from that circle. The group has to be diverse, so we want natives and we want descendants of immigrants. I think I could talk about the challenges, but that might be a next question. But letting the group come up with the ideas and concepts and decisions, not telling them what to do, which is impossible, close to impossible for me. I'm like, put tape on my mouth. It's important to honor their heritage. And I think we're trying to create space for future collaborations. I can see it working in the two regions where it's really underway, where now they're starting to talk about projects together that go beyond Arts Across the Prairie. I think Michelle and Shannon will agree, it's listening, and volunteering services. I think it's how we're all utilizing arts in rural settings. So letting it be the public expression of their cultural heritage, and showing, in particular in North Dakota, showing some pride in their work, which is a very tough thing for North Dakotans to do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing, and Kim and Shannon, that was great to hear. I wanted to pick up a little bit on something you said, Kim and Shannon, and Michelle, about this distrust and bridging through this distrust. And Shannon, I want to tie it into what you said about the way your state arts agency has its enabling legislation that makes rural engagement part of your DNA. And I thought that was really interesting and helpful to understand that it's part of the DNA of your state arts agency. How do you use that to go then into communities and meet people where they are and uplift existing community assets? And how do you help identify those assets?
Well, you ask people what their assets are, and you let them tell you, and that's primarily what we do. I mean, we're there to really help communities honor what they have and what potential they believe they do have, and work with them to get there. And one of the things that I'm sure is something that is encountered in a lot of rural communities, but particularly in Appalachian rural communities, is a deficit mentality that sometimes you just really have to work to get past, and help people realize that it's, you know, the glass is still half full, that there are really attributes about their community, even when they know that themselves, but they're thinking through a lens of an outsider rather than the insider. And so it's really about getting them to a place where they feel comfortable enough with you to really say, oh, there is something really great about my community, and this is how I want to enhance it even further.
Michelle or Kim, any other ways you work to identify community assets or something that resonates with you here?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes, well, what I have been recognizing, and this is also in urban metropolitan areas, is that there are going to be assets in both areas that we just are never going to see, or that we're never going to get assets or, excuse me, access to. And that is, again, because of one of the bullet points that I had pointed out earlier, was that there's just a fear of exploitation, or a fear of a township or an area becoming a tourism destination. And some residents just really, they don't want that. They don't want tourism, or they don't want the state, or they don't want a municipality or a county to tell them who's going to come into their town and why. And what I'm learning as I continue to go out into the field, that sometimes it just has to be okay. And we're not going to get to see that. But when you're ready, we'll be here. And I think also historically, from what we have learned, particularly with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, that again, we may never see it, and there's a reason why, and that has to be sacred, and sometimes it has to be untapped.
You know, a quick story, the recent Region 4 piece where you saw the pictures of the poles coming out of the ground. So a small local newspaper printed it, and then they posted it on their Facebook site. And I have never heard such vitriolic discussions follow. I was shocked, and I was defensive, and I thought, oh my gosh, really, do those people really think this? You know, don't build something on our land. It's beautiful as it is. Why would you invade the sky? On and on and on. And I thought, don't even respond. You cannot win this discussion. And then there were other people who, after it had died down a little bit, the positive comments started to come through, and people were saying, there's room enough. It represents who we are. We're really pleased with it. So it was nice also to hear the positive, and surprising to hear the negative. Sometimes it just is.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think it touches a little bit on what you talked about with the power of networks, Kim, with your reach group, and working across vast distances, and working with all of these different challenges and trying to identify assets. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about those rural networks you're using to build support and a foundation for this work.
Well, you know, it's a huge area. There's very few resources. A lot depends on that stakeholder group and keeping them invested. So there are monthly Zoom meetings. We're talking to the regional development councils, of which there are 8. We're talking to within each of those region, then each of the stakeholders is involved in groups. We're talking to tourism, which actually this program is based very heavily on tourism. So it's going to be interesting. You know, we had the conversation about, are you putting lights on these sculptures, and really letting some people say, no, night sky is important. We don't want that, you know, so we have to really, again, listen. I would say that where we're at now, just in terms of building the network, is we're about to hire a statewide project manager, which will help us, because this was a program that developed in the middle of the night, you know, sitting straight up, got involved in the Governor's Main Street conference, and now we're actually getting some funding from the legislature. And I'm really just trying to work with as many different state agencies and then regional groups to help us not only spread the word, potentially fund, help build contacts, and bring us new people to get involved.
Great, thank you, Kim. Michelle or Shannon, any ways that you see the power of networks in your states?
Well, I think that for us, and I mean, we are always looking for ways that help people realize that they have more in common than they have that divide them. So we do have a few networks that we participate in or even drive. One of my colleagues has just recently put together a makerspace network that is really, trying to really reach into communities, both rural and urban, where there are people who are doing avocational or amateur art making, so that there's not this big divide between what people perceive as professional and unattainable, or what is something that anybody can engage in. And so that's really where we strive, with our networks, is to really make sure that people are coming together and understanding and learning from each other.
I'll just piggyback off of that. Just quickly, just cleansing the residuals of COVID-19, if you will. There are a lot of our rural constituencies that are still really upset about the handling of the pandemic, the mask wearing, even just programming. Why did such and such get a chance to continue their programming, or why was Las Vegas, or why? So I feel like there's still a lot of cleanup to do, and a lot of healing to do. And I'm just one of these people that, or at least one of these public servants who, I want to be mindful of that. And so again, that is going to take time, a lot of time. But again, happy to get everybody on the same page that this was collective trauma that everybody went through, not just a particular group or not just a particular area. But we're getting there. And again, that is just going out into the field, again, continuing to build those relationships, and just also letting our constituency know that we are identifying those challenges and really working towards creating programming such as these professional development opportunities, but also really making a case with our legislatures as well. And I'll stop right there.
One thing I'll say about Arts Across the Prairie is that it's, as a program, it is about networking. It's like this huge giant web of connectivity. And it is, because it's not kind of focused on anything remotely political or current in a way, we're actually looking back at the cultural heritage. That seems to have been a wonderful bridge, and it is bringing more people to the table than we've seen in a long time, post-COVID particularly. But they're now, it's also my staff, our staff, we're out there. There are 3 program officers who are out there, and that's really important, to meet people where they are and not just expect them to look at the website and find what they need, because that won't happen.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just echo both Michelle and Kim that, in terms of COVID, we really did try to engage our constituents a lot online and through virtual meetings. And it was, it was what it was. But now that we are being able to get back into communities, it's really making a difference to be able to show up and make people, or have people feel that you actually care and that you're not just a face on a screen. So I'm really glad that we're able to get back and really do the work in the place.
Great, thank you. Eric, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for one question, or?
you all don't mind staying on just a little bit longer. It is 3:59, so I think we can squeeze one in if we run about 5 minutes over. So those of you who have to pop off at 4, please feel free to. We're recording this session. Everyone else, thank you for staying with us in advance. Go ahead, Declan, shoot with that last question if you'd like.
Yeah, okay, so I've got one question in the chat, and it says, in Massachusetts, our rural communities feel resentment about the perceived disproportionate state and private funding Boston and other cities receive for public programming. Is there anything similar in Nevada with Las Vegas?
Yes, there's always going to be disproportionate funding, especially now. It seems just across the board, especially in theater, if you're following everything that's happening right now, that you have, especially with the private sector, that funders really just aren't contributing like they used to. And I think that there are a lot of there are a variety of reasons, but I think one of them being is that a lot of private sectors, corporations, and organizations no longer want to associate themselves with activism, if you will, or anything that is going to disrupt their brand, if you will. And we're just in a place right now where we're going to have to look at really how we're all working together. That doesn't just mean how we're working with artists, but really taking an internal look at how we work internally, just in terms of our own bureaucracy, and how we can better support artists by consolidating our resources and really figuring out how we can help this void.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Kim or Shannon, anything else to weigh in before we wrap up?
I will say that there is a bit of, that urban rural jockeying in Tennessee, but because we get most of our budget, our grants budget, from the sale of specialty license plates, written into that legislation is a certain percentage that has to be spent in rural communities. So we're obligated, and we have to serve those rural communities.
I guess I would only add that, Fargo is a city unto itself, and then there's the rest of North Dakota. That's just a perception. So in some ways, I feel like for Arts Across the Prairie, staying away from Fargo till later is a good thing. But I think, with our grant programs and our legislators who really do come from very, very rural communities, we're really trying to get as much work done out there as possible, because it's only positive in the long run for everyone.
Great, thank you, Kim. Well, I want to